Hello and welcome to Mixture of Experts. On this show, we're going to be meeting weekly to review the sort of deluge of news that's happening in the world of AI. And the goal here is to distill down, right? It can be really hard to keep track of everything that's flying around on a weekly basis. But the hope here is by bringing together a group of experts, we can distill what's happening and give you an understanding of what's happening in the world of AI and what to be looking for in the week ahead. And so today I'm joined with a great panel of three experts, really hailing from different areas of the AI world. So just to quickly run through them, Chris Hay, who's a distinguished engineer at IBM. He's the CTO of their customer transformation operation. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Kush Varshney, he's an IBM fellow working on AI governance issues. Kush, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah.
And Shobhit Varshney, he's the senior partner consulting, running the AI and IoT business in the US, Canada, and Latin America. So Shobhit, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to cover three really big stories of the last few weeks. The first one is going to be the recent release of the Rabbit AI hardware product. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the troubles they've been having on the rollout and what it all means for the future of AI-enabled hardware. Secondly, we're going to talk about what's happening with GPT-2 chatbot, which is a mysterious chatbot that's just appeared on Chatbot Arena, what it is and what it really tells us about the evals in the AI and LLM space in particular. And then finally, we're going to talk about OpenAI's concluding of a deal with the Financial Times to license their data for training purposes. So I'd like to kind of start first with the Rabbit story. So Rabbit, if you've been watching, is a really sort of widely discussed hardware startup whose bid is basically to say, in the future, we're going to have AI-first hardware. And Rabbit effectively is a little device that is intending to be kind of an AI companion for you. They rolled out just recently and have run into immediately a number of problems. So they're, had to push a firmware update to deal with a battery problem, right? The battery was draining too quickly. They've been criticized recently because it turned out that their product was essentially an Android app that could be running on a phone. And so they've received a lot of criticism. And I wanted to bring up this story just because it feels like it's the second data point, right? So there was the release of Rabbit. Humane, which is another company that released an AI-enabled PIN, has similarly run into a lot of criticism. People saying, why would I buy this? Is this a good product at all? What is this all for? And so, Shobhit, I was hoping I would bring you in kind of maybe to kick us off here, because I think what's really interesting is, personally, I'm like very excited by the future of AI hardware, right? Like I think there's just so many cool things that can happen once AI is on device and it's a thing that you can carry around with you. But clearly, kind of some of the first forays, some of the most talked about forays that are happening today are clearly having some teething issues, some issues. And so I kind of want to get your take as someone who's like deep in the AI and IoT space and kind of thinking about the relationship between AI and hardware, how you see these recent stories and what do you think it tells us about how this market is evolving?
Thanks, Tim. I had the pleasure of playing with the Rabbit R1 at the CES this year. Mm-hmm. And I obviously, as a geek I am, I did drop my $200 and I received my Rabbit R1.
You own one, right? So
it is fantastic effort. If you think about the direction that AI is moving, it'll go to the edge more and more, right? You're seeing the models getting smaller. There's a lot of work that's happening in on-device computing. Apple breaking its walled gardens and open sourcing its OpenAI. You'll see Google with its Jam models. All of those are moving closer and closer to the edge. So I generally love the direction that it's taking. That way you get addressing things around privacy, your data is being computed on the device, and that stays with you. So the direction that the tech is taking is fantastic. I'm all for it. I think there's a lack of appreciation of what problem are you really trying to solve for, and are there other devices that are better suited for it. So when you start to react to a device like that, in your brain, you're trying to create a set of things that you're going to evaluate this on. I think that's where the problem is with R1 or from when you look at even Meta's Ray-Ban glasses and the Humane PIN, right? We have a set of things that we're looking to evaluate it against. As an example, I would appreciate that it understands me as a person really well if it's attempting to be a personal assistant. I would appreciate that it would have instant responses if I can do something in half a second or a split second faster on a regular mobile phone, I'm going to tend to go do that. So we're all optimizing for how to make it more effective in our own lives. Then you start to look at things around, I'm already carrying a cell phone in my pocket. So it has to be net new positive. Like, for example, the watch I'm wearing is adding something to the ecosystem, right? Versus when you create this set of criteria and then you start to evaluate Rabbit's R1, it starts to fail on some of the basic capabilities that I was expecting from it. The direction is great, but I think the battery life being very low, the fact that the screen itself is they're teasing you with certain things you can do with a touch screen, like typing on the terminal, but you can't really interact with the menus. The menus kind of remind you of how we had the old scroll wheel iPods. Those are amazing to scroll through music, but they're terrible at changing settings and things of that nature. And we see that paradigm shift over to the Rabbit R1 as well. There are a few things around taking images, the visual recognition of what's in front of you. That has been pretty decent. Like, I've had good response when I'm pointing it to certain things in front of me. Documents is a hit or miss right now. This handwriting recognition is still taking a lot more time.
So yeah, I was curious if you've got have you had what's your most magical experience so far, right? I mean, I'm almost interested in the Steelman case of what's the most exciting thing you've done so far with it, right? Because it's gotten so much hate online that it's almost interesting thinking about the killer application. I remember when I bought my smartphone for the first time, I was like, this has maps on it. I'm literally never going to be lost again. And that's a huge deal. And I guess in the AI space, I'm still kind of waiting for that. And I'm curious about as someone who owns it and uses it and is playing around with it, if there's things where you're oh, this is starting to be really cool. Yeah.
So I think the promise of the large action model is pretty cool. It has solved this to a decent extent with a few apps like Ubers and others. But the fact that a lot of the services that we use today are hidden behind applications, and not all of those capabilities are exposed through APIs. So it's difficult for, say, a personal assistant, Siri or ChatGPT of others to be able to go call those and do some actions. Yeah. So the large action model, I think that has a lot of promise. The training data becomes a constraint for them. That's their Achilles heel. So far, they've had hundreds of people manually go and train these models, right? And they're going to open up this catalog of hundreds of different models over time. But in the current form, it's very limited in what actions I can take on it. But the fact that you can delegate end-to-end process that's very complex and otherwise you couldn't have done it with APIs, and that's what really excites me. I see a lot of applications in enterprises.
I mean, I don't have one of these. I'm not as much of a gadget guru as Shobhit is, but yeah, I mean, I think I mean, there's going to be fits and starts with any sort of new paradigm, right? And things have to start somewhere. I'm more of an optimist on things generally. So to me, this is leading to is actually a fourth paradigm of how we interact with computing, right? I mean, there was punch cards, there was command line, then there was GUIs, and this is now, I mean, we're in this fourth sort of era, the natural language interactions and so forth. And I think, I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe there's no killer app yet, but the killer app maybe is the fact that we have this new way of interacting, and that's what these devices are going to start us on the road down. And I mean, having this more mutual theory of mind, this system interacts with us, it understands us, we understand it. I mean, I think that's where we're headed. And the more we can just keep down that road. I mean, of course, the first instantiation of anything isn't always the most perfect or the best, but I think that's where I'm optimistic about it.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of this interesting sort of hill climbing, right? Because I think, my friend was like, this is like Google Glass all over again, right? You're going to have a couple products that have such a bad rep that they kind of taint the entire market for a decade plus. But Kush, I was kind of agreeing with you. I was kind of well, it's not like these products are failing so hard, right? If you remember when Google Glass came out, people went into bars and got beat up because they were wearing the Google Glass. We're not there yet, and so it feels like we are kind of more in this hill climbing scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the device, but I think it's utter nonsense if I'm honest, right? And
Well, tell us why. You know.
well, if you think about what it is, right? What are you meant to have here? A camera, right? A touch screen, right? You need access to Wi-Fi, and then for it to be useful, you need a cell connection as well as you move around. It's going to do image recognition, and then it needs AI hardware on board. What is it? It's a phone, okay? So this is why you can't find a killer app, because the killer app is a phone. And when I look at it, and I'm going to give a practical example. So Apple Silicon is absolutely incredible, right? So last night on my M3, I fine-tuned the Mistral 7B model with my own data set in 15 minutes at 250 tokens per second. The GPUs is incredible. And that same technology is coming into the phones. Apple's going to go on device. They've got the hardware with Apple Silicon, and then the mobile phone manufacturers are going to do the same. So as far as I'm concerned, and I agree with the paradigm, but it's like trying to sell a pager to somebody today. It's like, here's this thing that's got the things you need. You can get messages but nobody has a pager, right? Because it was replaced by the phone. And so I do think there will be AI on hardware devices. I just don't get that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're also raising, I think, one final point I wanted to hit on before we move to the next story is, obviously the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room is Apple. It's not even 1,000 pound. It's like the 100,000-pound gorilla basically in the room, because it's got the hardware, it's got the data, it should be able to execute on all this. They haven't yet really, right? And so this is, I think, where all the other hardware companies see an opening is like, well, Apple's going to be so conservative that there's an opening in the market for at least to get in and at least maybe be a good acquisition target, right? I guess, Shobhit, just to bring it back to you, I'm curious if you've got any thoughts on Chris's attack on this whole idea, because clearly you were bullish enough to buy the products and experiment with it, and I'm curious if you got the Chris takedown here. Like, what's the thing he's not seeing?
No, I think he's on the right track. In the current state, it's not a great product, right? But just being an optimistic of where the tech is going, I'm more on the Varshney vibe of I see the promise of what this can bring. But I think that these devices will evolve, and Apple takes a while to come into this industry, right? Same thing goes with the Vision Pro glasses, right? I was a big fan of them when I bought them early on, and 30 days in, I did return them. So just the fact that I found some experiences and the promise of where this can be, at this point, I'm just waiting for the next version to come out. But I'm with you, Chris. In the current state, yes, the $200, I would have used it elsewhere, but I'm just a sucker for good tech, man.
Yeah, me too, Shobhit. But maybe my challenge back to you is, let's fast forward 6 months' time, post WWDC, right? When all of the AI capabilities start to move on to iPhone regular, which I think has already got the hardware that it needs to do these scenarios. And let's see if the rabbit actually comes out of your drawer at that point, or whether you're just doing those same scenarios on your phone.
Yeah, I think one of the funny scenarios I was thinking too is people right now obviously are focused on like the top end of the market, right? Which is like who's willing to pay hundreds of dollars for the rabbit. I also kind of think that as models get more efficient and more energy efficient, we may just end up putting really small models in all sorts of existing technologies. And, I think this could be both an interesting thing, right? And then also potentially like a bad thing. Like it's like 2035 and you're like arguing with your toaster to get working because at some point, like someone made like the only interface for this is language, basically. So... let's go ahead and move to our second story. So I wanted to talk a little bit about GPT-2 chatbot. So if you're not familiar with this, essentially this mysterious thing happens. There's this platform called Chatbot Arena, which has become in some ways kind of the gold standard for evaluating models. And it's a really simple idea. You basically have people talk to two models and you tell them which one you like more, right? And this has basically allowed the comparison cross-product of a lot of different sort of open source models and proprietary models that are floating around the space. And this kind of mysterious one emerged, GPT-2 chatbot, which everybody claims is incredible. It's amazing. And I agree, actually playing around with it, it's actually like quite impressive. And it was accompanied by this sort of mysterious, kind of opaque tweet from Sam Altman saying that he also, has good feelings about GPT-2. And so it immediately has led to kind of this like fan fiction, if you will, about what this model is and whether or not it is kind of a Trojan horse, quiet, stealth release of what could be GPT 4.5 or GPT-5. And so, Chris, I want to kind of throw it to you on what are we seeing here? Is GPT-2 chatbot really like the next generation model? And if you've got any kind of theories about that, we'd just love to get your take on what are we seeing? Do you buy the hype?
I don't know. I mean, I had to play with it. It's pretty good, actually, to be fair. Is it GPT-5? I don't know. I think they've hyped GPT-5 so much that if that is...
At this point, it has to be AGI or it's not even going to impress us.
Exactly. So maybe it's GPT-4.5. But I don't think that. I read a theory online. I can't say who's said it, but I actually like it. Somebody said that take the GPT-2 LLM, which they've open source. You can download that in Hugging Face, and they reckon that they may have trained GPT-2 on the latest data that trains GPT-4. And I think that's an interesting theory, right? GPT-2 with GPT-4 data. So maybe it's something like that. I don't know. But I don't think it's GPT-5. It probably is GPT-4.5. And as you say, you've got to put it in some sort of arena to see how well it's actually performing. And, they'll have run all the kind of MMLU benchmarks and the 20 other thousand benchmarks that's out there. So, sticking it in the chatbot arena, see how it performs there is probably quite a smart move, right? It's a good way of testing out how that model is. So I think, seriously, it's probably GPT-4.5, but I really like the idea that it's GPT-2 with GPT-4.5 data. I think that's a cool theory.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things there. One of them is if that actually turns out to be the case and the model performance is really good in the arena, it's yeah, do these architectures really matter? Is it just you have enough data and you can actually make this amazing? That ends up being the bigger lever. Well, curious, so I do have a follow-up question here, but just to quickly pause, I mean, Kush, Shobhit, I'm curious if you've got thoughts on, first, do you just buy the hype? Do you think this is the next model? Is it all overhyped? Curious if you got any thoughts on that.
It could be. I mean, anyone's guess is as good as anyone else's. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it is something that's coming up next, but yeah, why speculate? I mean, I'm sure they'll tell us pretty soon.
Exactly.
If you guys followed the talk by Andrew on how agentic flows are going to be the way we get to AGI, I think over time, the next set of models that you bring out, they will have a decent router that will go pick the right models. And you're seeing these kind of things come out from OpenAI already, right? They're automatically picking the right model based on the queries and things of that nature, right? So I think the GPT-2 would be a step in the direction of getting to, or the 4.5 and 5. But I think it'll not be just one big model that's going to be able to solve all of that. So I think they may be testing out in public and getting some feedback on how people are reacting, what kind of questions people are asking, and things of that nature in these open in the LLM sys arenas. It's very entertaining. It's great drama in the AI world. I love it. I just pull up the popcorn and just enjoy what's happening. There was somebody who posted that originally Sam Altman had tweeted with the GPT-2 and then edited that to make it GPT-2, and they're just leaving breadcrumbs to just make this more entertaining. So I love the direction that this is going in. I think over time, it'll not be one big 4.5 or 5 model, right? You'll end up with a mixture of experts, the way that they will solve for this.
Yeah, for sure. And just before we move on, you mentioned Andrew. Who is Andrew? And is that stuff public if people want to check it out, or is that internal?
Yeah, Andrew is god of AI. So he's, if you look at deeplearning.ai, he started the Google brain and whatnot. He has co-founded Coursera, is a great guy to follow on AI.
Yeah, and it's also very funny to me. It kind of occurs to me that it's whether or not it's Sam Altman or Taylor Swift, both are basically dropping breadcrumbs on social media as a way of driving engagement around their products. So, and just for folks earlier, that's Andrew Ng. If you want to check out his stuff, he's great. I agree. So I want to put on my tinfoil hat for a moment, right, to kind of go on the next sort of turn of the screw with this story. Is basically let's assume for a moment that GPT-2 chatbot is the next greatest thing that OpenAI is going to release. I think it's actually very indicative that one major way they want to do an evaluation around this model is to release it on Chatbot Arena, right? Because I think one of the interesting things I see evolving in the space is that you meet a lot of people who are MTSs, MLEs, like, basically like real deep and machine learning people who like, I think desperately kind of hate the idea that like, in order to tell whether or not a model is good, you just talk to it for a bit and then they tell you whether or not it's good or not, right? Like they would prefer to have some kind of much more structured evaluation for measuring kind of like conversational quality. But as it kind of turns out, Chatbot Arena is kind of like dominating the space over time. And, it kind of leads to this very interesting world where it's like become more and more difficult to like quantify model quality. And we're almost just kind of falling back to like almost the most one brain cell way of evaluating models, which is, well, I don't know, you talk to it for 10 minutes and then you say whether or not you think it's good or not. And I was joking with a friend recently. I was like, oh, what we should do is we should start reviewing models like we review like fine wine, where you're like, oh, this is like a model with like, oaky overtones and it's a little bit more conversational. And like, I think we're like moving in that direction. But I'd be curious to hear from, particularly like Chris, like whether or not you agree that like that is the future. Because it is so funny that like what's happening is basically you have this super advanced technology, but our eval methods remain like very rudimentary. And I think some people would say that's good. Some people would say like, well, that's not how it's always going to be. So.
I think it's a good thing. I mean, is it really that different from the original Turing test, right? That's what Alan Turing said, right? Which is you go have a conversation. If you can't tell the difference, then, is it human or not? And actually, if I think about the problems with the benchmarks, then this is why I quite like the ELO ratings. Again, it's not perfect. LMSys, I think they do a good job there with the leaderboard, but the problem is that because all the benchmarks are published, we know everybody is fine-tuning to the benchmarks, right? So, so how valuable are the benchmarks really? So everybody's like, I'm 84, I'm 85. And you're like, well, but if I then ask a query that's completely different, that's not on a benchmark, then it starts to mess up, right? So one of my favorite tests is I play hangman with the various models, right? And sometimes I'm playing the game, and sometimes I'm choosing the word. And I can tell you straight up, none of the models play hangman very well, including GPT-4, right? So if I give it the word, so I use cheese as my test, and it very quickly guesses the E. So you get blank, 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 E, right? There is no other words. And then every model is like, I don't know, an R. I'm like, what? Why are you guessing an R? And therefore, that sort of vibiness that you get from the kind of from the arena is really important, because they're the sort of things, the creative sort of tests that we'll have. We'll play hangman, we'll play tic-tac-toe, we'll ask different questions. But if you are literally training within an inch of its virtual life, being fine-tuned to the benchmark, then how valuable are those benchmarks really? So I think the future has got to be tests where you can't fine-tune, i.e. you don't know what the questions and the answer are in advance, and it's got to be a little bit more creative. Whether that turns into benchmarks, whether it turns into kind of, LMSys as we're doing today, whether it turns into, as you're saying, is like this model has this kind of vibe, it's a little bit chatty, it's good at classifications, etc. I think you're right, it might move in that direction. But I think at the moment, the arena is probably the only sensible place where you can actually rank these models.
Yeah, for sure. And I hadn't really thought about that as like one, if I hear you right, I mean, one of the arguments is like basically all of the benchmarks we've been using are now kind of useless, is what you're saying. So like almost like there's been this collective action problem where like everybody's gaming the benchmark. And so the only thing you can really trust ends up being like, I don't know, you have like a 12-year-old talk to it for a little bit and tell you whether or not, they like it or not.
You can trust if everybody's at the same level you can't trust if everybody's at the same level of benchmark. That's no indication whether the model is better than any other model. But obviously if a model is really low, then you can sort of say they've got a little bit of work to do on that model. But at the higher end, if you go, oh, I'm 0.2 better in this benchmark, reality, who cares?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think, and I also buy that, right? Which is basically, maybe it's actually a sign of the success of these models, is that like a lot of the leading ones are so good now, right? That like the benchmarks are a lot less useful because like, we're talking about these gradations that in terms of like actual experience of the model, like very limited.
Tim, most of my counts of when I'm talking with clients, these are Fortune 100 companies and where we're doing Gen AI at scale and we're putting things into production, there's a much higher threshold of what good looks like and how can you define it, especially in the regulated industries that I work in, financial services, federal government, and things of that nature, right? In those cases, you have to be very precise on how do you measure the accuracy, how do you measure if the answer is correct, it's grounded, it's hallucinating, things of that nature, right? So for majority of my Fortune 100 companies, when we partner with them, we create a system of benchmarks that are very tailored to the way the use case that they're putting into production. So for example, if you're looking at a RAG pattern, you're looking at pulling the right content. Is that content correct? From those snippets, are they ranked the right way? Given those snippets, can I reliably create the answer? Is it grounded? What's the roundness score? And given the answer that you retrieve, does that really answer the question that was asked and stuff like that, right? Across each one of those, it's based on the kind of domain that they're working on. If you're looking at, say, contracts and you're trying to analyze if the answers pulling out are correct or not, the question itself will define what is a good metric for it. I may ask a question about, given a contract, tell me if I can order this particular part from that contract or not, which means it's looking at the top of the contract, it's looking at an exception on page 19 and so on and so forth. So there's more of a chain of thought to understand how things are connected. But then if I say, can you contrast these two contracts? That's no longer a RAG pattern. You're now asking a question where it's pulling out the right information, comparing it together, giving it to an LLM. So each query has its own set of metrics that we need to evaluate at each query type, right? Yeah. So we've created some very robust metrics to evaluate these models. Whenever we have a new model like Llama 3 came out and Snowflake's Arctic came out in the last few days, we need to plot that model into that workflow. 10-step process. Step number 4, I'm going to call an LLM. Everything that comes before and after, we need to have a good set of metrics to evaluate it. So majority of my Fortune big companies that we're working with, they kind of they look at the metrics and say, hey, a new cool model came in. So it's the vibes that a new model came in. But the evaluation, we do not look at human eval scores. We do not look at the scores that are public in nature, because those are not as meaningful to the enterprise use cases. So partnering with consulting, our clients have built these really robust benchmarking mechanisms, and that's how we've been bringing these to production. During experimentation and production, just continuously evaluating that throughout the day.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's one of the interesting things. Like I was talking with a friend recently, I was like, in the future, we're probably going to have these agencies that just focus on evaluation. It just feels like it's a emerging business. It's like essentially like models and pre-training become more and more commodified. The big question will be like, well, which one should I actually choose? It feels like there's a whole industry to be built in terms of like bespoke evaluations, even in like curation of people who evaluate your models seems like a critical question.
Yeah, we're going to start interviewing models like we interview humans, right? You model are applying for this HR job. So you are going to be evaluated against your HR skills. You model are a developer. Let's see what your React coding skills are like. And, you know, and actually, I think it's a fair point, right, Shobhit, which is, it doesn't matter how good a model is on a benchmark, right? What only matters is it good at the task you need it to do? So if you need it to do legal contract comparisons, it doesn't matter if it's the best poetry writer in Snoop Dogg style, right? What matters is can it evaluate contracts, because that's the job you want it to do, and can it do it reliably?
One point I just wanted to make related to what Chris was saying on kind of people fine-tuning to the benchmarks. So one thing that the HiFi Research Lab of IBM, they're putting together kind of this hidden benchmark, so not releasing it anywhere. And they have this thing open sourced called Unitext. So it's a way to, actually construct these very quickly, very easily, and so forth. So I think that's, generally one direction that is also going to be emerging is that job interview also kind of being hidden away so that people can't train to it and things like that. And I think what Shobhit was saying is precisely right. These have to be right on point, on task for the sort of usage that you want. So one thing we talk a lot about with customers is something called usage governance. And that is precisely that, right? You don't want to care about what else this model is doing just for what is important for your application, for your industry and things like that. So I think it's a great area, and the government regulations are going to require a lot of this third-party testing and evaluation too very soon. So I think everything is headed in that direction.
Yeah, totally. One of the stories I was thinking about covering, which we probably will end up doing in a future episode, and Kush, it'd be great to have you back on it, is like NIST, right? And like kind of the development of all of these like federal standards in the space and what it's going to look like. I hadn't really thought that it's going to look like this a standard like HR interview. Like I love the idea that like in 2035 you're basically like, what's your greatest weakness to the model? Or you're like, I'm going to need you to do this bubble sort. It's like the question you're going to ask people, the models to do, and hopefully models will find it as frustrating as humans do. So.
Yeah, and I think models are going to evaluate models too. I mean, we're already seeing that quite a bit. And one thing our team is working on a little bit is, so the arena is actually just a pairwise comparison with a human judging two things. But if you have three models, we can actually figure out smart ways of having models figure out which ones are good. Because when you have three models, let's say one is an expert, one is a novice, and one is like intermediate, the expert can know which one's the novice. The intermediate one can also know which one's the novice. So with using three at a time, you can actually figure out kind of a total ranking of models and stuff. So it's a fun game to be in.
Fantastic. Hey, Kush, yesterday we had a new paper by Cohere talking about the panel of LLMs, right? POLL. That was a very, very interesting way of looking at it. Instead of having one LLM as a judge, when you start to mix different LLMs as a panelist, you get a better accuracy in being able to define that. I also think that the task that we are asking an LLM to do has to fundamentally, we need to have a better appreciation for what steps an LLM is better at versus humans. So I feel this is a little bit of a flaw in our benchmarking systems today, where we are evaluating. If you look at a 10-step process, there are certain steps along that way that humans do that are incredibly easy for LLM to take on, right? They'll just slam through those. And then something very, very fundamental will be so darn hard for an LLM to get right. So I think we are projecting what we are good at as a good benchmark to evaluate LLMs. I think as we go play around with these more, we'll have a better understanding of what should we evaluate that LLM on. So I think the benchmarks themselves will start to evaluate change. So I'll probably not ask them what their strengths and weaknesses are, or tell me a J story and things of that nature. But I'm sure we'll have a better appreciation of what kind of questions we should be evaluating these LLMs that are in context and grounded in the use cases that are in production for our enterprise clients.
Let's move on to the final story. So this will be a quick final conversation, but I think it was a big enough story that I think it's worth bringing in. So the news broke earlier this week that OpenAI had signed a licensing deal with the Financial Times, basically to license their content for training purposes. And obviously this happened on the backdrop of OpenAI, getting sued by the New York Times and a number of other kind of rights holders, right? And the kind of question about what are you allowed to train on? Is it a copyright infringement? What do companies like OpenAI owe to people who, whose data is integrated into their models? Is a really big one. And Kush, I know you work on AI governance, so I kind of want to throw this over to you for the first sort of take. I'm curious if you have any reactions to this news. Like, do you think that we're going to see more of these types of licensing deals going forwards in the future? And sort of if so, why? I'm sort of interested in kind of like what's driving sort of the business decision here.
Yeah, so the content creators certainly need to, receive something in order for them to just exist, right? Because pretty soon we'll have run out of all the tokens in the world for these things to be trained on, right? And so the new content needs to come from somewhere. It can't be just fully like synthetic generated data. That will lead to model collapse and all sorts of other sort of things. So how that happens, copyright was always meant not to be a permanent sort of thing. It's just to protect those creators during their lifetimes so that they have some livelihood and so forth, right? So I think that's the idea that we need to keep going with. And so it might just lead to a completely different business model. So local journalism has kind of died in the world, and maybe this is a way to resurrect it, because you need to have, like this information that is coming from somewhere when we have a RAG pattern or anything else. There needs to be timely information as well. So I think just the fact that content needs to be there, and we need to have a way to have it kind of incentivized and so forth is the crux of it. at IBM, I mean, we do a great job trying to eliminate all copyrighted content out of our Granite models. And I mean, we do a lot of stuff there, but eventually I think it's not a question of like who's infringing, who's getting sued, who's doing licensing deals, but how do we just make an ecosystem such that the creators are valued as much as anyone else?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is actually really at the crux of whether or not this AI economy can work, right? Because I think that, if you want to use Google as like an earlier template, right? It was sort of this interesting moment where we said, okay, you'll allow us to index all of the web. And in exchange, we're going to send traffic to you because we're a search engine, right? And like that actually created a trade by which, an ad economy could work. It feels like here are the challenges that we haven't yet built that infrastructure to create sort of that symbiosis, right? And so like essentially there's nothing incentivizing the creation of new high quality tokens, which is going to be a structural issue for the market ultimately. I guess, Kush, maybe the question I'd have for you to maybe push back a little bit, because I was debating this with a friend of mine. My friend was like, this is all just window dressing, right? Because it turns out that like Financial Times tokens are just like not that valuable to OpenAI. A, it's not a whole lot of tokens. And B, they already have a lot of news stories, right? Do you kind of buy that? Like how valuable are the kinds of tokens that we're talking about here? When it comes to a newspaper or when it maybe even comes to like, say, like, is it more valuable to get, movie scripts, right, than it is news stories? Like, I think this ends up being a really interesting question about like where the most valuable tokens are coming from. And I'm just curious to be like, if you do think that these kinds of like journalism tokens, which have been the focus of so much attention, really is where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, journalism tokens have been in the news, but comedians have been suing as well. I mean, it's not that it's one or the other, right? So, I think it's just the fact that it has to be new tokens. And there's distribution shift, right? The world is changing. Now we have whatever we talked about at the beginning, right? I mean, these new gadgets, the terminology for those isn't going to exist in kind of any historical documents. So we need to keep up with the world, the way the meanings of words change. Any sort of new thing that comes up, right? And news tends to be one place. I guess comedy routines tend to be another place. I mean, wherever this, where the world changes, however we can bring that in, I think that's where the value is, because it's not about the number of tokens, it's the quality, and the quality in terms of how to get these models to keep adapting to the world as it exists.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so we're probably in wrap-up mode right now. Does Chris, Shobhit, I'm curious if you got any final takes on this before we close up.
I got one take, and it's probably going to be on the opposite side. And we had this chat before, Tim, which is I think there's going to be a whole business on data washing coming out there, because if you really look at this, and yeah, I think there will be some folks like Financial Times that will license their data, and that's great. But if you take 5 articles, which is a news article, on the same subject, I run it through a model, I get it summarized, and then maybe I open source that data set, right? And then somebody else who's training a model goes and use that open source data set, right? Where that data originally came from is gone, right? And as far as the model trainer is concerned, it's like, oh no, I used this open source data set, which is MIT licensed, etc. Yeah. I pulled it off the internet. You're now one step removed from the original content sources. So I think that's going to become a big thing. And then I see people doing that commercially as well. So as much as we're all good people and we want the provenance to go around, I just don't see a world where everything is so lovely and we're all high-fiving each other and how good we are, right? I see this data washing world coming really, really quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a different, slightly different take on this. I think it is quite dangerous. I'm a big proponent of decentralized AI. I'm with Ahmed from Stability AI's camp, right? And he left Stability AI with this mission of decentralizing AI. I think the fact that OpenAI is making a decision to partner with one news outlet, if they picked Fox or they picked CNN, they would have a different set of news articles that are being trained on, right? So I think there's quite a bit of a bias in the media itself, right? If you look at the elections coming up and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
What decisions you're making on what data you think is high quality. It's a single entity's definition of what is high quality data. Whereas if you look at human beings, like we're being exposed to all sorts of different, both ends of the spectrum of news, articles and stuff, right? So I think decentralizing is going to be very important, and this also goes to speak to open models where people can add data on the fly and they can personalize it more and things of that nature. I think it is a little bit dangerous when large organizations that have become access of power with AI are making decisions unilaterally on what good looks like. What FT would produce as news articles may not be representative of what the culture or what the demographics of a particular country or particular region are. So I think there's a little bit of a definition of, hey, if I'm using a Gen AI model from a particular vendor, do I just get to go personalize it and say, hey, I'm left wing, I'm right wing, or I am more like my thoughts on particular topics, and it gets more and more personalized to me. And that defines how it responds and becomes my personalized version of it. Right.
I wonder, Shobhit, if the training is actually the important part for the OpenAI piece. I wonder if actually it's just going to be ragging that data is actually the key thing for them, because you're giving the up-to-date article. And therefore, as you move into those agentic platforms, training the model is not going to be that valuable, but actually being able to serve up and say, this is the latest news from Financial Times, and it's valid and it's not hallucinating. I think that's probably valuable.
So Chris, I think it's just like kids, right? It's nature and nurture, both of them. So I think that's where we're heading, right? So like what is your nature of the kid that was born and how they were nurtured over time? But thanks so much, Tim. This is extremely helpful. Great set of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, everybody. I could have not asked for a better panel to start with our inaugural episode. So Chris, Kush, Shobhit, thanks for joining us, and we hope to have you on a future episode.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, everyone.